Welcome back, Truth Seeker. In recent days, August 29th, 2018, news story emerged about Odell Beckham's tattoos that he received in 2016. And there's a lot of very interesting imagery on his back, and there's a peculiar theme which I want to talk about. Before we talk about Odell Beckham's tattoos and what's on there, I want to start right here with the description of Jesus Christ in the Bible. And in case you're going, well, what? Just stay with me. This is all going to connect and it's going to be very clear. In the Bible as we know it, English speaking people of the world, there's only one physical description of Jesus, and it comes from Revelation 1:14 through 16. And it's this: it's about the return of Jesus Christ. His head and his hairs were white like wool, key word, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice is the sound of many waters. Now, what do things look like when they burn in a furnace? Do they look white? Not typically. And who has hair or wool? Is it white people? No, it's not. The physical description of Jesus from the Bible can most likely be used to describe someone of African descent. And I don't know how anyone could describe anything different. Further, if you take the Apocryphals, the books that have been removed from the Bible, there's a story about Methuselah, the oldest person from the Old Testament. Methuselah lives to be 969 years old. He has many children. And in the Apocryphals, there's a story about how one of his children is white. And it makes it so Methuselah doesn't know what to think. Why did he give birth to this white child? What does it mean? When you consider Methuselah is a Jew or a Hebrew, the descendants of Abraham are Hebrews, it's another clue as to who Jesus Christ was, or at least described to be. Jesus is a descendant of Abraham. Abraham's a Hebrew. So, with that said, let's now move ahead. And here's a little physical description of brass burnt in a furnace, just to give you a visual. So we're going to talk about Gematria in regards to Odell Beckham's tattoos and how there's this clear theme by understanding Gematria with his tattoos. Gematria is this ancient language that comes from the Hebrew alphabet, which was also part of the Greek alphabet. In Greek, it was known as isopsophy. The Greeks learned from the Hebrews. The Greeks wrote the New Testament, which follows the Old Testament, which was originally constructed in Hebrew and some Aramaic, language that's, you could say a descendant of Hebrew or related to Hebrew. It's the cousin language. But anyhow, in Gematria, which is also in English, just notice, God's Son equals 93, crucifix equals 93, Nazareth, the place of Jesus, 93. In recent years, science came out and said that Jesus was crucified on the 93rd day of the calendar year, the way we now tell time. Covered that in the past. The blog post is up. I cover it in detail in my book. I show the news headline and story. They trace Jesus' crucifixion to the 93rd day of the year, so they tell us. This number 93, its significance gains when you look at the gematria of Christianity. Using the Sumerian cipher, Sumer, part of Babylon, Sumer is where the original language comes from. This code of letters and numbers comes from Kabbalah, which traces back to Babylon and Sumer. Anyway, what's known as the Sumerian cipher, where you multiply each letter of the alphabet times 6, so A is 6, B is 12, C is 18, D is 24, so on. When you write out Christianity in this cipher, it sums to 930, 9-3. 0. And in the Bible, unless you're talking about Catholic Bibles, but in the 66 books Bibles, the 930th chapter of the Bible is where the Christian section begins. Matthew 1:1, which is where the 42 generations to Jesus begin. And consider 42. This other number stamped all over black history. 42 generations to Jesus, the way it begins. New Testament equals 42, Savior 42, sin 42. There's the 42 laws of Ma'at, which go back to ancient Egypt, part of Africa, where many people of burnt bronze skin once lived, and hair of wool. Anyhow, 93. We're going to be talking about a lot about this number with Odell Beckham's back tattoos. Also, with regards to the Greeks being credited with writing the Bible, the Greeks are also credited with many mathematical discoveries, including the mathematics that are still used today to calculate the distance from the Earth to the sun. And we say the sun is 93 million miles away. The Son of God, 93. Anyway, the Greeks made that calculation of the sun and its distance in the Hellenistic period. And look at what's been done in English. Hellenistic period equals 93, like 93 million miles. This is the period of time that the Greeks calculated the distance of the sun, made many mathematical discoveries. The first book of the New Testament is Matthew. By the way, math with the alphabetic order equals 42. Matthew, alphabetic order and reduction, also equals 27. There's 27 books in the New Testament. Also, with regards to the Greeks, if you think of one name from the Greeks, it might be Alexander the Great. And notice his name also 93 in the base ciphers. Jesus Christ, JC, Jesus and his 12 disciples, the sun and the 12 constellations, 13. JC equals 13. Now we're going to transition to Odell Beckham, number 13 of the New York Giants, who a year ago was on his knees with 13-13 on the clock when he got hurt by the numbers. Something that happens a lot in sports. So, his tattoos, they feature faces such as Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Michael Jackson, the crumbling Chrysler Building, and more. And there's a very clear parallel between a lot of these things. In the base ciphers, Chrysler Building equals 93. Why does he have a tattoo of the Chrysler Building crumbling? You know, he also has a picture of Lady Liberty with her head chopped off, some other destructive symbolism. What's that about? With regards to Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X being on his body, two black men who died by very similar numbers, notice Martin Luther King Jr. equals 93, Malcolm X 93, our two most basic ciphers. The alphabetic order for Malcolm X, the alphabetic order with the rules of numerology for Martin Luther King Jr. Both men killed at age 39, like how 1939 was a big year for segregation in this nation. That name Rosa Louise Macaulay Parks also 93. Black History Month in the base cipher, 93. He has a tattoo of Michael Jackson. 93 was a really rough year for Michael Jackson. That's the year the allegations began of the sexual abuse of children, something that tarnished the legacy of Michael. So, Jeremy White, he left this post, and the bottom of Odell Beckham's back, he has this scene from Planet of the Apes. And he points out that there's this channel, G-Dash the Prophet. There's other people speaking out on the web showing this symbolism of the Planet of the Apes and biblical riddles and the Hebrew Israelites and what's taken place in this world and the loss of the identity of the Hebrew Israelites. When he said that, I thought, I wonder what the Gematria of Hebrew Israelite is. And sure enough, it's 93. 93. This same number. And in Planet of the Apes, which is tattooed on Odell Beckham's back with these other faces and symbolism, he talks about how, in Planet of the Apes, there's gorillas and there's also apes that have this name that you don't want to have associated with you. They're kind of like the sellout apes. They're called donkeys. Interesting that gorillas and donkeys have gematria of 93. And thinking about Israel in 93, there's something I've talked about for a long time. The partition of Israel happened September 3rd, 1947. 9/3 like 93. And with regards to 93 being associated with the sun, also Saturn, two objects in the sky that are associated with keeping time. The word time with the alphabetic order is 47. They drew up the boundaries of Israel on 9/3 in 47. And they were drawing up the boundaries of this nation for a new Jewish nation so that white Jews could immigrate to Israel and have their own nation. Now the thing is, the people we call Jews, they don't match the description of the Jews in the Bible. Jesus is a Jew from Judea, a Hebrew, with burnt brass skin and hair of wool. Those aren't the physical features we think of in modern times when we think of Jewish people. It's as if etching these lines on September 3rd is in a way to mock the truth and mock history and reinvent what happened before. Something that goes on all the time in this world. There's a book written about this, 1984, about how history is ever changing and the past is being forgotten and a new present is being created for a future agenda. So anyway, what else is interesting is Planet of the Apes. In light of Planet of the Apes having this symbolism for these things happening in the world, Planet of the Apes happens to sum to 64 like Israel, also like Zion, like the Zionist movement, the creation of modern Israel. And at the same time, there's a lot of black people that speak to Zion, Hebrew Israelites, but from a more of a true biblical perspective. So there's different people using the term Zion with different ideas in mind. But it all does come back to Israel. But just what are the odds of it lining up so well that way? And that's what I love about Gematria. You hear people say, okay, I'm watching this movie. I see this symbolism. It reminds me of this and this and this. And then you apply the Gematria and you go, oh, wow. Okay, what they're seeing and the arguments they're making, now it's further supported. And understand that's what this research was to me from the beginning. When I started doing this, I was looking for greater proof to prove what I already saw. These riddles, these narratives, these mockings, major lies, such as September 11th. And I was looking for greater evidence to prove that there was a real agenda. And I knew there was something about numbers with it. And lo and behold, you learn this code, it sheds light on a lot of things. So go watch these videos that have already been done about the symbolism in Planet of the Apes, and then come back and watch this video. But just notice, how perfect. Notice also the word ape has gematria 59, like Negro, like slave, like blues, like jigaboo, like darky. Odell Beckham also has a tattoo of Joker on him from Batman. Joker, I know the character's not played by a black person, but still, who really put this tattoo on him and for what reasons? It seems that there's a lot of subliminals here, and we know that Gematria is this hidden language, this hidden riddle, of the elites. And I have no doubt that Odell Beckham did not choose the tattoo that's on his back with all that symbolism. There's probably so much more to decode. But just how interesting that Joker is just like Negro in both of the base ciphers, alphabetic order forwards and backwards. Don't forget the Million Man March was on the day leaving 76 days left in the year, plus a whole lot more. What else jumped out about me in the base ciphers about Hebrew Israelite is that it's summed to 159, like black man. And last year covered this. September 15th, 15/9. News headlines. Cop acquitted for shooting black man. The national news covered that story that way across the board. Cop acquitted for killing black man. September 15th, 15/9. You know, you learn the code, you can't deny it. I just did that recent decode for somebody who follows the work who lost a loved one years ago on the day leaving 159 days left in the year. He thought it was a ritual murder. He was a black man. His name had Gematria of 159, and he was killed on the day leaving 159 days left in the year, plus a whole lot more. Go back and see that video. The death a gangsta earned. Just did it days ago. What else is interesting is the name Odell Beckham Jr. in the base ciphers, Gematria of 79, also like Hebrew Israelites, 79. Again, all this symbolism, and the whole Planet of the Apes thing. 79 is also the 22nd prime number. Negro has Gematria 22, Ape 22. Remember Aretha Franklin just died at age 76? They had the tribute concert for her 2 weeks after on a date with 76 numerology, and they had 22 performing acts. None of this coincidental. But Ape and Negro also 22, 79, the 22nd prime. And further bringing all of this together, all of this symbolism and the timing of this, Odell Beckham is 25 years old right now. And his birthday is November 5th. November 5th. Saturn, again associated with keeping time, is the only planet with Gematria of 93. Saturn also has Jewish Gematria of 511. November can be written 5/11, like 511. Saturn, the keeper of time, he's 25 years old right now. Time has Gematria of 25. Whoops, I forgot to do a copy and paste. I'll just show you this so you don't have to question if it's true. From the day this story came out, which again was August 29th, I'll come back up here and show you. This story broke August 29th. Notice they posted it at 9:50 p.m. This is also right after his $95 million contract, which is by the numbers. But from August 29th, 2018 to his upcoming 26th birthday on November 5th is 68 days later. 68 days later, it's also a span of 69 days. But look at this. Again, 68 days later, span of 69 days. The word planet has Gematria of 68. The word planet, or not planet, planet with the alphabetic order 68. The name Saturn, when you flip the alphabetic order around, is also 69. You see? 69. And Saturn is the most significant planet to the occult. Saturn's symbolism is also huge in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, which is 39 books, the reflection of 93. So, how perfect all this lines up. And what's interesting is his upcoming birthday is his 26th. In the septenary cipher, which is also relevant, Saturn's 26th. This is all lined up with his upcoming 26th birthday. In that septenary cipher, we've talked about this before. African American equals 44. Black Hebrews also equals 44. Obama was number 44. MLK was killed on 4/4. Malcolm X was killed on a date with a life lesson number of 44. His assassin got 44 years in prison. The word kill has Gematria 44. Been a fateful number for a lot of people. Those three famous running backs at Syracuse, Jim Brown, Ernie Davis, who was the first black football player to win the Heisman, and then who was murdered a span of days from the Heisman by the numbers, which is all covered in my book and past work. And, what was the running back after him? Was it Floyd Little? Is that his name? But they had all three of those great running backs wear the number 44 and not arbitrarily. No. So anyway, I'm just telling you that so you understand this is a relevant cipher as well. I just want you to see how they released this story about his back and the tattoos with 93 coded all throughout, the symbolism in it, a number that resonates with Saturn, how all of this is synced up. You know, it's all a perfect ritual. And if you missed my work on the contract, in the two most simple ciphers, Giants equals 70 and 25. Odell's 25 years old. He signed his contract 70 days before the birthday, just before this news story. But I've been wondering, what is it for sure about 93 and Black history? Again, Black History Month's 93. It's this number stamped on a lot of black people. Beyonce Giselle Knowles equals 93. She was in Motown the night Aretha Franklin was announced to be on her deathbed. Monday, August 13th, Aretha Louise Franklin, 93. Nicki Minaj, 93. She has the Queen album right before the death of the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, and just so much more. There's just so many 93s stamped on black history. So what's it about? My theory was, what makes your skin black? The sun, right? The sun blackens the skin. It makes the skin darker. So there's a logical reason. 93 is also this very biblical number. And now we learn Hebrew Israelites is also 93. So all of this to me shows the greater significance of this number, why it's been done this way. With regards to the Greeks using this number, remember the Greeks learned pretty much everything they learned from Egyptian culture, which is African culture, which is again the place of the people of the hair of wool and the burnt brass skin. So I hope I explained this clearly enough. A lot of people get really mad at me for suggesting that Jesus was a black man, and I don't know why they get so angry, because I don't know what other evidence there is in the world to suggest what race he is. This is what we have from the Bible. You can take the pieces from the Apocryphals, other books that have been removed from the Bible, and to me it all points in one clear direction. And the end of the Bible says the false Jews will rule in the end times. Now, who's ruling this world? It's definitely not the Hebrew Israelites. That said, if you read the comments down here, somebody makes a point. He goes, Zach, have you noticed that on YouTube they're allowing all these people who claim to be Hebrew Israelites talk about all of this racially divisive stuff and all this hatred? And I do realize what he's saying. There's a lot of people on YouTube who are black who are saying things like, it's time to kill Whitey. It's time to kill white crackers. Enough of the white crackers. By the way, cracker equals 59. Think about that next time. But I do see this. YouTube's allowing this. YouTube's allowing popular, channels in the black community to say these things. And there's a guy on YouTube named General SETI. He's saying this in videos and raising money, and he's having people pay him to come speak on the streets and say these things. And you don't see YouTube censoring this content. I've been censored 20 times. I've never said anything so specific. I even recently just got visited from the FBI and accused of saying, let's kill a group of people, and I've never said that. And they know I've never said that. They just came here to, I think, try to scare me, but it didn't work. But it is true that, YouTube is clearly allowing a certain group of people to do that. And you know what? That goes to what I was speaking about since 2013. I said this media is trying to, rile people up, bring all this racial divisiveness here, make it white versus black, and it's working. It's working with certain people. Certain people are getting angry. Certain people are feeding into the narrative. I actually just watched this live stream with General SETI, and I think the other guy's name is Young Pharaoh, young black man. And, both of them are pretty intelligent people. They do have a lot of truth, but they have this very pro-black agenda and very FU towards white people rhetoric. And when I was watching their live stream, the man who goes by Young Pharaoh, he said, look at this news story and look at this news story. And, they're using the news media to get worked up about these terrible things that white people are doing. They even had the story, they said, look at this white person's making masks out of black people's faces. And I was just like, oh my God, this is just like the Nuremberg trials and skin lamps and skin sofas. And if you just read the comments to my videos, I mean, just the types of comments that certain people leave me, like, shut up, why do you just talk about your own race? And I mean, for people who don't know, I grew up in a neighborhood where I was the only white face around. You know, the majority of the people I lived around were poor minorities, mostly black, some Hispanics, some Asians. I was the only white person on my block, you know? And as a child, you don't really grow up thinking about race. You just think about your environment and you accept the world the way it is around you. So I lived in that neighborhood for some time, and then my parents, you know, we wanted to get out of that neighborhood, not because we were scared of the races of the other people around us, but because it was a bad neighborhood. There were shootings, there were cars crashing through our yard, police chases, needles out front, all sorts of things. The home got burglarized multiple times. You know, people are ripping off our house. There's nothing even in there to steal. People would kick in the door, thrash up the house, and everything would still be there because there was nothing worth taking. But so anyway, we moved out of that neighborhood as I got older, and everything that happened to me just gave me life experience. When we moved to I would say a poor middle class neighborhood. We weren't with wealthy people there either, but it was a nicer neighborhood, and there were definitely a whole lot more white people. And what I realized, honestly, was I missed the people that I lived around in my poorer neighborhood because they were friendlier, you know? The newer neighborhood I moved to, the one thing I did like about the newer neighborhood is there was way more children. But the people weren't as friendly. And I think people who've lived in poorer communities do tend to realize that the poorer community has better community, you know? So anyway, when people insult me and say, like, just stick to your race, whitey, it's like, you know, you shouldn't speak on what you don't know. I am mostly white. I'm also a big chunk native. My grandmother's half. And I've never done one of those DNA tests. You never know what else you got inside you, but I've always thought of myself as multiracial and, you know, coming from a diverse community. So, and again, part of the reason I started speaking out in 2013 is because I just saw this agenda and I just wanted people to see how the media's lying and trying to make us hate each other and all this division. And when I do these videos, you know, suggesting that the evidence shows that Jesus was black, I'm not trying to piss anybody off or you know, cater to some agenda. I'm just trying to say, look, these are the facts, and I don't know how you argue with the facts. And I think it would be good for the world to recognize the truth about Jesus' race, because I know there's so many Christians, you know, white Christians, who don't like black people. And I think if they saw the truth, they might realize the irony of their predisposition towards a group of people that they've been programmed to hate through the same media. That's what this media does. It programs people to hate. It's all about divide and conquer. That's what it's all about. Divide and conquer. They got every group of people hating every group of people. You know, everybody's racist. So it's all by design. Yeah. Get a greater look at these tattoos. It's like, I mean, who'd put this on their body? Why would you have the Chrysler building in New York crumbling to the ground? And of course that reminds you, I mean, what does that remind you of? This big tower in New York crumbling to the ground? It can only remind you of one thing. How about the World Trade Centers, where you had the 93 World Trade Center bombing, and now the building that stands there is called what? It's called One World Trade Center, which equals 93. And if you've never seen my work on why this is and what 93 has to do with that, has to do with the Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb, which equals 93. It's not a coincidence those buildings turned to dust in the air as they fell to the ground on September 11th. You know? So thank you, Jeremy White, for making these observations. G-Dash the Prophet, one of several YouTubers that has work on Planet of the Apes and the Hebrew Israelites and the riddles within. But again, just the gematria. The gematria connects the dots further. It's that greater evidence. Evidence-based research. That's what I'm into. Undeniable patterns. And In case this video makes it to General SETI, I already reached out to General SETI once. I asked him to come on my radio show. I want to interview this guy because he speaks with so much hatred towards white people. He's ready to kill all the white people, and YouTube loves it. You know, YouTube loves it because you know why? Because YouTube's part of this agenda. You know, YouTube wants to support the things going on in the mainstream, and the mainstream is promoting this type of hatred. So, General SETI, if you're out there, you got to come on my radio program and explain it, you know. Why are you falling for the traps? Same with everybody else in this world that's falling for the traps. You come on too and explain it. Trying to show you how to not step in the traps. All right, until next time.